What makes a society thrive or fall? I believe what makes a society thrive is virtues. And by virtues, I mean most and foremost to set for your life meaningful and achievable goals, such as a career, such as learning a trade and making yourself useful. And a society in which a majority of people do that is a society which will become free and prosperous. That's a very conservative view. It has been said many times from conservative ideologues that this is what makes a society thrive. But that's not what most people believe. Conservatives believe it to some extent, but there is a large number of people who believe that it is education, that if you found schools and just educate people, reading, writing, and history, and so on, then the society will prosper. There are those who believe that freedom will do it. If you just have freedom, law and order, if that's at all what you mean by freedom. But let's say you mean that, you have capitalism, that will do it. And then there are those who just think that it is about race, that some races are smarter than others. Yeah, you have an intelligent race and then the society will prosper. That's a little bit cruder, I think. I believe this is ultimately all wrong, even though freedom has a lot to do with it. And of course, knowledge has also something to do with it. But the core reason for society to prosper, the primary reason, is simply that a majority of people just say to themselves, I just want to make something of my life. I'm gonna become a doctor or an engineer, and then do that. That is the primary reason. And capitalism, freedom, is going to be a corollary thereof. That's what I believe anyway. And I believe that with a couple of conservatives, I would imagine. It's a conservative attitude. I also believe that whether people or not set themselves meaningful life goals depends, of course, on their personal taste. It depends on what interests them, what inspires them, what they seek. A lot of things that come out of themselves, but it also depends on what they believe the world is like, on their ethics, on their values. Things that usually come from the outside. For example, when a boy looks for role models and sees people who earn a lot of money in a specific trade, and then hears that those people are heroes, that they're great, that this is something desirable, worth achieving, then he is likely to pursue that way. When, on the other hand, he hears that it's not worth achieving, that it can't be done, maybe he doesn't even see those role models to begin with. Or he sees those role models to begin with, but they are called evil, they're called exploiters, or they're called godless. Then he might be not pursuing that road. He might be intimidated to do it, or he might even consciously turn against himself, against his desires. He might define his desires to have a career such as them evil. Sociology has the concept of a social milieu, which means a group of people who share common values, ethics, a common culture, who live together and sometimes don't change over time, such as in examples Orthodox Jews or the Amish, and sometimes they do change over time, then they are more difficult to identify. But clearly they're still there. For example, countries. Germany today, for example, has a very different attitude, or somewhat different attitude, than Americans. And that is because there's a language barrier, ideas don't really are exchanged that fast, and that is why there's a common characteristic. That's not the only reason, of course. Jews living in the lands of Gentiles can still be a social milieu, even though they're exposed to the Gentiles all the time, because what parents give to their children is much more close and much more intimate than the influence the Gentiles have on Jews. So this is a very important thing to realize, that there are social milieus who, within society, form an identifiable group. And when you think of all the children who grow up in a social milieu, they will of course be influenced by those ideas. They will be influenced in the way that they will be encouraged to take up a certain trade, for example, or discouraged to do so, in the sense that I outlined in the first half of my video. There is a very, very famous sociologist with the name of Max Weber, who wrote about 100 years ago an article called "The Protestant Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism." And this is a very, very fascinating read. I always believed, before I read it, that the Reformation was basically getting rid of the supremacy of the Pope, and that this sort of broke the backbone of the Church. Yeah, the Church was disabled, and I identified that with Christianity. So to speak, Christianity was broken after the Reformation, and that is what brought about the modern world, because then people could get reasonable. I don't believe that at all anymore, because this article makes a compelling case that what actually changed was the theology. The ethics changed. And it changed in a way so that people became virtuous. It changed in a way that good and evil were completely redefined. And that what happened in the 30-year-long war within Christianity was a war that wasn't just about how people pray or superficial rituals. It was a war about values, about who is evil and who is innocent, who's the hero and who the villain. That is what they were fighting about. It was a fundamental clash of values. And the new values, the reformed values, were the ones that pushed mankind into the modern world. I will later make videos that more explain this theory and why I believe the conclusion is actually true. For now, just think about who it is that is economically successful today in the world, which social milieus it is, and which social milieus it has been historically. In Europe, that would be first and foremost the United Kingdom, then the Netherlands, parts of France, parts of Germany. Not Spain, Italy, Greece, up until today. The latter are unreformed Christians or descendants of unreformed Christians. The former are descendants of reformed Christians, even though today they are largely secularized. But still, they are descendants of reformed Christians. And if the Reformation planted a seed to people making meaningful life choices, then that might have remained, even though the theology itself did not. And of course, the United States, a very reformed Christian country. Southern America, Middle America, unreformed Christian immigration. That's a very, very strong empirical case. And now, the objectivist among you might say, John, Reformed Christians still have an irrational theology. Well, theologies are always irrational. That's why they're called theologies and not philosophies. How can they possibly have brought up the modern world? And the answer to that, the preliminary answer I give before I make more videos about the actual content, is, have you ever heard about a computer program that worked even though it had bugs? And Christianity didn't really work in the end, did it? Today, the world is largely secular. So it didn't prevail. But it worked long enough. It worked long enough for cars in the streets and airplanes in the sky.